Okay, we're up to question 41 in our books. And you have your glasses? I was going to get you one of the books. Okay, we'll let you learn by hearing. Okay. Okay, question 41 in chapter 3, verse number 17, we're going to look at. I do. I was going to offer that. I don't know what page number. It's question 41. Page what? Page 25. Okay, verse number 17 says, "But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy." Okay, so the question is, what will be the 7 effects of receiving wisdom from God? And I just told you what they were. Okay, so you can, if you can write these down, if you don't have them there, it's going to be being peaceable, gentle, easy to be spoken to. I've got merciful or not getting even, having good fruits, impartiality, and integrity. And if you missed that list, just look at your verse. It's all there in that verse there. Okay. As we look at this, there is a flow that is going on from here, and these each of these fruits are can be logically connected to each other. I don't know if it was intended that way, but we certainly can take it that way. And in fact, as you look at other passages in the Bible, and I'm thinking of the Apostle Peter saying, to add to one's faith and virtue, and he goes on, and to virtue this, and to the other thing that, and that is a thing that is a significant aspect of our spirituality, is the idea that there is a growing process. One of the things that I think is interesting in the New Testament, when people talk about sin, and everybody knows that we have sin, but if you ask somebody, well, what are your sins? I don't know that they would necessarily be able to give you a list. And I always tell people, no, I'm not going to ask you for your sins, okay? Do you know you're a sinner? Good. You want to get saved? Okay, fine. We'll go from there. Now, if somebody in counseling wants to talk about something, then yes, we will talk about things. But it's not like in a church where they're going to be taking confession for sins. And by the way, the Roman Catholic Church is not the only church that does that. There are Episcopal churches that will do that. Not all Episcopal churches, but the high church, the ones that want to be very much like the Catholic Church. Let me see if I got somebody here. Okay. Okay. Okay, and also in the Coptic Church, and they'll take confessions. Now, I was talking to somebody recently about getting saved, and was trying to explain that the problem in the confessional is that the priest is getting absolution for you, that he's getting God, some forgiveness from God to apply to your soul in penance. Okay, if you want to share a problem with somebody in prayer, and I recommend that you be very careful about that. If somebody says, well, I'd like to pray about such and such, I'll try to find some way to put it delicately in the prayer list. And sometimes I'll say, well, yeah, but we'll just keep that as an unspoken, because sometimes people, I think, might mean well, but they don't realize that they're giving too much information. They're trying to be open about it and everything. And I'm going to say, well, okay, well, here's how we'll put it. So not only when you give a prayer request, I'll boil it down to one or two words, some key words for us, not just to keep the prayer list contained on one page when we go to hand out the prayer list, but it's also there to not overexpose people. So having said that, when we talk about sin, sometimes some people, they don't think themselves great sinners, but there are several extensive passages where the Apostle Paul goes through a whole list of sins over in Romans chapter 1, and he goes through this whole list. And you say, well, is that necessary? Well, yeah, it is, because people don't really think about it. They think that they're half all right. But then when you start looking at these lists of sins, you say, hey, I do like 90% of these sometimes. Well, similarly, there are lists of things that we can grow by, and our spiritual growth, we should think of it as a process. Now, having said that, there are those in church history who thought of salvation as a process. And I'm not talking about the Catholic Church, I'm talking about those who look at perseverance of the faith, the Calvinists and the Puritans. They thought of salvation as more of a process. I remember reading, the name's just escaping me, hang on, Pilgrim's Progress. Pilgrim's Progress. How many people have read Pilgrim's Progress? Okay. Interesting book. It's often given as a signed reading. I was not crazy about Pilgrim's Progress. To me, Pilgrim's Progress sounded more like the guy was going through this whole process in order to get to heaven. I did not realize that the guy was a Calvinist, and he was looking at salvation as a process, not that you were going through a process of works, but you were going through a process of spiritual growth. And there's problems that come from that anyhow with that whole theology. But salvation is not a process. I will say, though, that sanctification is a process. One of the things that's also interesting about our brains is that we can retrain our brains. It might take some doing to do it, and we might have problems of going back to things. Maybe something can trigger us in the future. But we can retrain our brains. I always tell people we are a mind and we have a brain. Okay, our mind is going to survive our brain. So we have this wonderful organ to be able to think with, but we do have to train. And that's kind of what's going on in this passage here, is looking for this spiritual growth. So we'll look at this as a process a little bit, and how one thing can lead into another. Okay, but the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated. And we can go on from there. Receiving God's wisdom does not merely inform us, it transforms us. And so we want to look at the divine wisdom that comes on us and blesses the believer, and how each leads naturally to the next blessing, forming a spiritual progression that shapes both our character and our relationships. So it's first pure. That's the foundation of true wisdom. God's wisdom purifies the heart. So first we become pure in our spirit, okay, not so much our soul and our body. We have to bring that under control, but he gives us that born-again spirit. And one of the reasons that people, have the struggles they do is they don't feed their spirit. And it's not just you sit down at one big feast like at Thanksgiving and gouge yourself. It's not that you just load up. I mean, we go through eating every day of the week, don't we? And we watch our diet, and we as we get older and we're struggling with whatever, we realize that we've got to be careful of the timing, and we got to be careful of what kind of calories we eat, and all of this stuff goes into to be able to lose that weight or get on that physical regimen. So there's got to be that growth that comes out of it. We first get that purified spirit, which is going to now lead to the next things. Without purity of motive, everything that follows is distorted or fake. People will have distortions. They'll have fake growth. You got to start with that relationship with God first. Matthew 5:8 says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." So you got to see God first. Then comes peaceableness, okay? Peace grows from a heart that's pure. When we talk about peace, I always like to point out that peace is not referring to the absence of chaos or the absence of stress. It's talking about being at peace with God, that we've made peace with God. Our peace was made through the cross, and we've been brought next to God. So a pure heart is going to be peaceful in that it is joined to God. We're going to look for harmony and not division. God's wisdom quiets conflict and makes us peace-loving, not contentious. So when the heart is pure, it seeks peace with God and others. It wants to spread out from there, not through compromise of truth, kind of having peace and saying, well, I'll tolerate this error, but wanting to bring the peace of the gospel to people. So it's not through compromise of truth, but it comes through humble grace. Romans 12:18 says, if it be possible, and then it goes on to say, live peaceably with all men. As much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. So you start off with the purity, and you're going to now reach out to others. Well, when you reach out to others, okay, comes the next problem. Because as you start to talk to other people, sometimes you want to bop them one, right? Okay. But no, the next thing is gentleness instead. We want to be gentle with all men. 2 Timothy chapter 2. And 24, where it says, and the servant of the Lord must not strive. And some people can test your faith, right? But be gentle unto all men, apt to teach, patient, in meekness instructing those that oppose themselves, if God peradventure will give them repentance to the acknowledging of the truth, and that they may recover themselves out of the snare of the devil, who are taken captive by him at his will. When somebody is, and this is a thing that I bring up every once in a while, when somebody is being a jerk to you, okay, that as tempting as it can be to put the person in their place, our job is to realize the guy's proving that he's a sinner. Okay, I knew that he was a sinner, and now he's giving me proof positive of it. What he needs is salvation. And so we will go at it gently, trying to instruct them. Now, I will say that there comes a point where you might have to put someone in their place, but just because there's a point where that does come, I can justify that scripturally, just because it can be done, doesn't mean you start off that way. Okay, it doesn't become an excuse to give people what they pretty much need, but you can't do. Okay, but we're gentle. Think of it as a child. We've heard of the kids that have gone to school and gets the wrong answer, and the teacher yells at them. You think, what is that person doing teaching? It's kind of like you're struggling to get your multiplication tables down. You've got a teacher yelling at you. Just does not feel like a good teaching method to me. Yeah, Brother Joe.
Yeah, I've seen on more than one occasion when I ride the train in the morning, sometimes things get a little crowded and sometimes people get jostled and sometimes people take offense to it. And I remember this one time, there was a guy on the train and he looked like he was posturing because he just looked like he wanted to fight or just, somehow to, I don't know, maintain his manhood or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what happened exactly. But the guy that he was not a small man, but the guy that he was arguing with was even bigger,
Yeah.
and he was definitely looking for trouble, and the guy just kept saying, "There's no problem here. There's no problem here. I've got no problem." And the guy would have been within his rights to because the guy was really getting in his face, and I thought that was just such an example of what this is, because he diffused the whole situation.
Yes.
If he had said anything other than what he said or how he said it, I was just amazed at the composure that he maintained, because this guy was really being, just not being a nice person. And, the guy was just like, hey, there's no problem here. And the guy goes, all right. Because I think he was frustrated at the fact that this guy was not giving him any space to, to get into it with him. Yeah. But I thought, wow, that was really, what a great example that was.
Yeah. One of the things that's done in communication is this, what they call a Socratic method, and I've talked about this before, where what you're basically doing is asking somebody questions in order to get clarification of what they're thinking. Okay, because the people are not thinking and they're spouting off sometimes, and by asking questions, say, well, I'm not quite sure I understand exactly what you mean. When you say such and such, you've just communicated that to that person that you were listening to them, number one, and you heard them say such and such, but I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Okay, a lot of us when we go to speak, all of us when we go to speak, we have an idea of what we mean in our head and what the words mean, but sometimes people don't understand some of those words. They have a different definition for them sometimes, and it takes some time to try to gently be able to get somebody to share more. So peaceableness, gentleness. Philippians 4:5 says, let your moderation or gentleness be known unto all men. Okay, so you're being gentle with them, but now they're going to start talking to you. So you need to be easy to be entreated, that you're approachable and that you can talk about things. So wisdom not only helps us to be gentle to other people, but then also makes us willing to listen and to look for correction for ourselves, that we can understand things better and not defensive. Gentle spirit does not insist on its own way. It's receptive and reasonable, easy to approach, and eager to do right. Okay, so you've gone from purity, you know God, and you've got peace with God, and you're trying to extend that to others. You got to be gentle, you got to be willing to listen, and then you got to be full of mercy, because when the person does prove themselves to be a jerk, you've got to be able to be merciful as well, forgiving and compassionate. So a wise person is full of mercy. He's not eager to get even. Okay, he's merciful. A lot of times, people just want to slap back at each other. We have to be quick to forgive and help. One who listens and yields easily, if you're easy to be entreated, is also going to be quick to show compassion. Luke chapter 6, verse 36 says, be merciful as your Father also is merciful. Okay, so you can see the progression here, and this is something that we need to do as a matter of training to exercise these things. It's kind of like when you go down to the park and they have all these training stations, and you move from one to another as you try these muscles to get trained, and then you try this muscle to get trained, and you go through all these muscle things. Well, we go through these as exercises. Okay, so you move on from being merciful, then comes the fruit that comes from that. Good fruits, visible righteousness. God's wisdom results in action, having kindness, justice, generosity, and other spiritual fruit. Mercy is not passive. It takes action also. Wisdom that is merciful becomes fruitful in real, observable ways. John 15:8 says, "Herein is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit." Okay. Now, as you're going through this, you realize that some people are easier to work with than others. Always make sure to be partial and sidle up to those people and get rid of the other ones. No. Okay. No. It seems to be a popular thing to have people setting boundaries and having the negative people out of their lives. No, the negative people are the ones you want, because you're a soul winner and you want to win souls. So you're going to look for sinners. So they're going to be negative people. So we want to make sure that we are not partial. Wisdom leads us to treat people fairly without favoritism, without bias or prejudice. Deuteronomy 1:17 says, "You shall not respect persons in judgment." We can't be selective and self-serving, only keeping those people that will lift us up and contribute to our comfort. We are going after sinners, and we shouldn't be surprised that it's going to be hard. Okay, and then finally, we're going to have integrity. We're going to have, let me just look at something real quick here. We're going to have, we're not going to have hypocrisy. We're going to maintain our integrity. We're going to have a fair standard in season and out of season. Romans 12:9 says, "Let love be without dissimulation." And dissimulation means without hypocrisy. Make sure you're loving those who are unlovable as well as those who are lovable. Wisdom of God will produce integrity. No masks, no pretending, just consistency between heart and action. Okay, so God's wisdom blesses us by shaping a character that is pure, and from that flows a peaceable, gentle, and approachable spirit, which will make us merciful, lead to good fruit, promote fairness, and ensure integrity, not hypocrisy. So it's not just a list of virtues, it's like a package. Each part contributes to it. When you have an engine, you don't just have a carburetor. You don't just have a piston. You don't just have a crankshaft. You have a crankshaft, a piston, and the carburetor, and then all the other parts. It's designed to work together. And so this wisdom will flow from us. But it is a list. And lists are hard to remember. So the lists take practice. And it takes, I think, long practice too. Finally, Matthew 11:19 says, "Wisdom is justified of her children." Okay, in other words, the children of wisdom will be proof positive that the wisdom was there. Okay, let me ask if there's anybody has any question or another comment. Anybody from home also, possibly then.